with just 26 days until the presidential election, the message coming from politicians, celebrities, and social media networks alike is get out there and vote. But with the focus on mail-in voting, several states have already reported problems that are creating new concerns ahead of Election Day. RT's Rachel Blevins is joining us now from the newsroom with more details on this. Rachel?
Yeah, Manila, we know the concept of free and fair elections is something that the United States prides itself on, but problems with early voting have left many wondering if their vote will actually count. Let's start in Florida, a state that is known for being a hot topic when it comes to elections. Back in 2018, Florida passed landmark legislation to allow some felons who had completed their sentences to vote. But then last year, the state introduced a new series of hurdles and requirements that left many registrations pending. A recent investigation led by ProPublica found that now, although Florida officials have not removed any felons from the rules for owing fines or fees, it's still unclear whether those whom the state fails to prune are entitled to vote after all, or may even face prosecution if they do. On the topic of registration, Florida state officials are now facing a lawsuit after their website crashed due to heavy traffic on Monday, which just happened to be the deadline for voters to register. While they extended it another day and claimed that more than 50,000 successfully registered on Tuesday, civil rights groups are calling for an additional 2 days to be added. While the U.S. is still trying to limit in-person crowds, the focus for many states in 2020 has been to encourage voting by mail. But that hasn't come without problems. As early voting kicked off in Ohio this week, the Franklin County Board of Elections confirmed that a significant number of voters who requested absentee ballots reported receiving the wrong ballots altogether. The board is now scrambling to make corrections. Similar concerns were reported in New York City, where residents took to Facebook to share that some absentee ballots had been confused with military ballots.
This is how people vote. And to have that moment where something that you do believe is a legitimate, safe way to vote, and to have that moment and see that there is an error in your ballot shakes you. And you don't want to be shaken because you want to feel good about voting.
Meanwhile, residents across Los Angeles County reported receiving not just one, but up to 3 ballots in the mail, raising concerns that it would allow many to cast multiple votes for the candidate of their choice. And some residents in New Jersey didn't receive a ballot at all. This week, a U.S. Postal Service mail carrier was charged with discarding nearly 2,000 pieces of mail, which included nearly 100 general election ballots. Now, so far, millions of ballots have already been submitted by mail across the U.S., but growing concerns over when ballots will be counted, how many will be rejected, and how they will influence the outcome have continued to have an impact on American voters. Reporting in the newsroom, Rachel Blevins, RT.
Now, with an already contested election before Americans even go to the polls, even Europeans are weighing in about America's ability to execute a truly free and fair election. Really, only 1 out of 10 Europeans surveyed believe that U.S. elections are going to be free and fair. But between the controversy of mail-in ballot fraud to felons' ability to vote in Florida, gerrymandering, the list goes on. No matter what side of the aisle, confidence in elections 2020 comes into question. So joining us to discuss is co-founder of Code Pink, Medea Benjamin is joining us. Hello, Medea. Nice to see you. It's been a while. Thanks for joining us.
It has. Nice to be on with you, Manila.
So there's obviously a lot of controversy surrounding the drive for mail-in ballots this year, different than we have seen in years past. Some say it's a safer method to get the vote given the pandemic. Others say this is opening the door to fraud, as we've seen a few instances of ballots being disposed of in the trash. Where do you fall on this mail-in ballot issue?
Well, historically, mail-in ballots have been very safe. There has not been a problem with fraud. And the incidents that are being cited now are just so tiny. The problem is that the president has questioned the legitimacy of these mail-in ballots because the majority of Trump voters will vote in person, whereas the majority of Biden voters will vote by mail. So it's the strategy of Donald Trump to try to make it as if there is questionable security around the mail-in ballots, but it's really not true. Mail-in ballots should be absolutely safe. The problem is twofold. One, will the post office, with the recent cuts, be able to process all these mail-in ballots because more people will be voting by mail because of the pandemic? And two, will the states give the time needed to count all those ballots? And will Donald Trump hold off on declaring a quote victory before all the ballots are counted?
Yeah, good points. And former presidential candidate and obviously multi-billionaire Mike Bloomberg may have bowed out of the race early, but he's definitely making his presence still known in this election by stepping into Florida's battleground state, spearheading the effort to help former felons pay their court debts in order to regain their ability to vote in that state. He says doing so, he's not in any way coercing anyone into registering as a Democrat or for any party in particular. Do you believe that narrative, and how do you think that's going to play out?
Well, I think it's absolutely disgusting that Florida is one of the last states that has made it very difficult for people who have been felons but have paid their debt to society and are now free to continue to be disenfranchised. And even though the majority of people in Florida overwhelmingly voted to change that, the state, by having this issue that you have to have no fines, fees, or liens, continues to make it hard for people to vote. And it's just another example of how the Republicans are trying to tamp down the vote, particularly among the Black community.
And what about gerrymandering, Medea? We've seen people talk about this for, I think every election cycle, but how do you see this shaking out for 2020?
So our elections have always been problematic, whether it's gerrymandering or voter suppression or the ridiculous electoral college that we should get rid of, the fact that we don't have same-day voter registration. All of those are problems. But this year, everything is coming together to create more of a problem. And the gerrymandering is indeed a problem because if this becomes a very contested election, it might be that the states then get to decide in the state assembly who the electorates are in the electoral assembly. And that will be extremely problematic and will go against the popular vote even more so than it has happened in the last elections.
Yeah, that's right. Where we draw the lines for different districts are going to impact how the Electoral College is doled out. And lastly, the DOJ is easing constraints on election fraud inquiry. Why would they do that? And how is that even helpful to this democracy?
It's not helpful. There should be no constraints on that. I think this is all really a setup. And it's interesting that you started the segment talking about the Europeans believing that there won't be free and fair elections, and the majority of Americans questioning now. I think we need robust international observers from all over the world to come here and look at our elections, because with all of the shenanigans that have been going on so far, I think it's pretty clear that these elections are going to be fraught with uncertainty that could lead to a real constitutional crisis in this country.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Medea. Given how much people bring in the U.S. to go look at other people's elections, what's good for them should also probably be applicable to us. Just saying. Medea Benjamin, always good to see you. Thank you so much for weighing in on this.
Thanks for having me on.